In the heart of the small town of Coatesville, Pennsylvania, the longest continuously operating steel company in the United States, heats and rolls the huge specialty plate for which it is famous. Known for its strength and durability, Lukens steel can be found in structures as diverse as the Benjamin Franklin Bridge and the icebreaker Manhattan. The success of this company can be traced back over 180 years to one person's determination.
I remember the first time I ever ran into Rebecca Lukens. It was November 6, 1989, and I had just joined the corporate communications department at Lukens Steel. I was being shown my office, and as I walked into that room, over the fireplace was a picture of a woman in a white cap, very distinguished looking, and she obviously had the place of honor in the room. Your curiosity is immediately piqued. Why would a steel company have a woman's portrait hanging over a mantelpiece?
I have lately often thought I would pen a sketch of my life, which would be interesting to my children when their mother should slumber in her grave. My design is not merely to gratify their curiosity, but if possible to improve them by warning them of those errors in which my own inexperience too often led me, and by holding up to their view the bright example of their father. I will begin my narrative from the earliest years which memory can furnish me with incidents to relate.
Rebecca Webb Pennock was born January 6, 1794. Her parents, Isaac and Martha Pennock, were part of an extended network of Quaker farmers who had been among the earliest settlers of Chester County, Pennsylvania. Nearby, in the young nation's capital of Philadelphia, George Washington was serving his 6th year as President of the United States. The Americas had won their political freedom from England, but they had only just begun their struggle for economic freedom. As colonists, the American settlers had supplied England's industries with raw materials like cotton and iron, and imported expensive manufactured goods in return. Now, for the first time, U.S. citizens were free to build up their own manufacturing industry. Isaac Pennock saw an opportunity, and in 1793, he founded the Federal Slitting Mill. Here, cast iron bars were reheated in a charcoal-fired forge, rolled into metal strips, and shaped into nails, barrel hoops, and wagon wheel rims.
What iron production involves is changing the composition so that there's more iron and less of some other materials. It's metallurgy. And what it depends on is people who have skills of knowing what's going on without being able to see it. People have to pay attention to what they hear. They have to pay attention to what they smell. That kind of training takes time. It begins with apprenticeship, and then even in your early years as a craftsman, you're honing those skills.
Isaac's slitting mill was strategically located for success. He could reach the major industrial market of Philadelphia in 2 days and had easy access to his main suppliers of raw material, the large iron forges of Hopewell and Hibernia. Isaac sometimes took his young daughter Rebecca with him on his travels around Chester County. She loved being with her father and spent as much time with him in his mill as she did at home with her mother.
Rebecca is the oldest child in a family where a boy isn't born until the 4th child. So in some ways, she takes the place of a son. She grew up learning about technological processes by watching them. And then she had the added benefit of having a father who talked to her about it and explained it to her.
My father was generous and amiable, full of the kindest feelings. My ideas abound with the instance of his indulgence. Every innocent amusement was allowed me, and I have bounded over hill and dale as wild, happy, and joyous as youth could make me, when I neither knew fear nor feared misfortune.
Rebecca's mother, Martha Webb Pennock, came from an established and well-to-do Quaker family. Even as a young girl, Rebecca would have been strongly influenced by Quaker traditions and beliefs.
Quaker women would have given Rebecca Lukens a solid foundation to stand on. In the monthly meeting, the group of women would have gotten together and made plans around the schooling of children and around the care of people in the meeting who were ill or who were in need. Many Quaker women supported schools and a whole variety of civic things, hospitals and roads. So she would have surely had within her daily experience women who took leadership roles.
Isaac Pennock decided to send young Rebecca to Westtown School, a nearby Quaker boarding school. The Pennock family had little difficulty paying the substantial $64 a year tuition.
This is the student register, which shows that Rebecca Webb Pennock entered Westtown School in September of 1806. She was 12 years old at the time. The education was intended to be practical, so Rebecca's subjects would have included mathematics. The girls took math as well as the boys, reflecting the Quakers' belief in equality. The girls did have the same educational opportunities as the boys. The script and the presentation in the book would have been important as well as the problems that were worked. The students also took bookkeeping. Bookkeeping, again, would have been something very useful in their daily lives to learn how to keep their personal accounts or perhaps even business accounts.
The young country was growing up along with Rebecca. Its markets were expanding, and new machinery was being built that would take over more and more of the work previously accomplished by human labor. Even minor technological improvement increased productivity, and imaginative innovation appeared everywhere. In response to the nation's industrial growth, new mills sprang up and old ones expanded. In Chester County, the Brandywine River and its tributaries provided the water power for many of them. In 1810, Isaac Pennock and a neighbor bought a 102-acre farm from Moses Coates. There was an old sawmill on the property, which they converted into a primitive ironworks, and named it the Brandywine Rolling Mill and Nail Factory. Unknown to anyone at the time, it would be Isaac's decision to purchase and renovate this property that would determine the extraordinary future of both his iron mill and his young daughter. When her education was completed, Rebecca's father invited her to join him on a trip to visit relatives in Philadelphia, and she welcomed the opportunity. While there, a friend of her mother's came to see her, accompanied by a young medical doctor.
She was not alone, and I felt my face glow as she turned to introduce me to her companion, a Dr. Lukens. He bowed with a peculiar grace, and for a moment my eyes rested on his interesting face and tall and commanding figure. Yet it was the expression of his countenance that most interested me. It spoke of lofty, unbending principle, while the benevolence which beamed from his eye and the suavity of his manner won their way to my heart.
On March 25, 1813, at the Fallowfield Meeting House in Chester County, Pennsylvania, Dr. Charles Lukens and Rebecca Webb Pennock, taking each other by the hand, promised with divine assistance to be faithful and affectionate husband and wife until death should separate them. Rebecca Lukens was 19 years old. The young couple settled near Rebecca's family. Their first child, Martha, was born, followed a few years later by another daughter, Elizabeth. Charles had become caught up in the excitement of the expanding iron industry and went to work in Isaac's company. The American Industrial Revolution was in full swing. The market was demanding an increasingly higher quality in its iron. Charles recognized in these demands a unique opportunity, and with an eye towards this growing market for steam engines, he and Rebecca decided to lease Isaac's Brandywine Iron and Nail Factory. In 1817, the family of 4 moved on to the old Coates Farm property.
We found that everything about the house, mill, and farm was in a forlorn and wretched state. The mill had been hastily built, and the harness was too light to bear the weight of the necessary castings. We told my father I thought it scarce right for us to have so much to do, that the works should have been put in repair before we came. His reply invariably was, "What you are doing now will make it so much the better for yourselves, for when I am gone, this property will be yours."
With this incentive, the young couple began rebuilding the decrepit mill, adapting and purchasing the equipment they needed to produce a higher quality of iron. Charles and his craftsmen focused on pressing boilerplate for the new steam engines and found a way to roll a plate of iron that was wider and more uniform in strength.
Her iron enjoyed a reputation for high quality, and that had to do with the ingredients. She bought good pig iron, and she used good charcoal, and she employed skilled labor.
In 1818, their Brandywine Iron Works produced America's first rolled boilerplate.
If we could visit the Lukens rolling mill, we would see as we approached it the sluiceway bringing water to the large overshot wheel which powered the mill's massive machinery. Going inside, we would immediately be struck by the noise of metal upon metal as sheets of iron were pressed and cut and dropped. The gears, powered by the water wheel, drove the rollers and the power shears. The working environment was dirty, noisy, hot, and dangerous. Orders were given by shouts and hand signals. The iron slabs, which arrived from furnaces such as Hibernia and Hopewell, were heated red hot in furnaces to make them malleable. They were then moved to the rollers, where they were pressed into progressively smaller thicknesses for stovepipes, boiler iron, and other plate.
During this busy time, the Lukens family grew to 7, welcoming the birth of 2 sons, Charles and Isaac, and a daughter, Isabella. Rebecca had her hands full, raising children, running the 19th century household, and remaining a very present partner in decisions about the iron mill. But as their family grew and their business expanded, Rebecca and Charles were dealt a series of personal blows. In short succession, Rebecca and Charles lost their infant son Isaac and Rebecca's beloved father. While still mourning these losses, their only remaining son Charles died also. During this period of grief, Rebecca learned that her father's will did not clearly pass ownership of Brandywine to her and Charles, as had been their clear understanding. And her mother Martha contested Rebecca's ownership of the mill. Meanwhile, Charles Lukens' reputation for producing quality iron had attracted the attention of John Elgar, an imaginative Quaker engineer. Elgar hoped to build the first iron-hulled steamboat, the Codorus, and he was looking for the strongest and lightest iron on the market. At the Brandywine Iron Works, Lukens was able to produce the thin iron sheets that Elgar needed for the construction of his steamship. But shortly after this plate was rolled and the order filled, tragedy struck again, changing forever the fate of the Lukens family and of the Brandywine Iron Works.
In the summer of 1825, I lost my dear and excellent husband, and then commenced my hard and weary struggle with life.
Charles Lukens died suddenly of a fever in June of 1825. 31-year-old Rebecca was expecting their 6th child, and the business was still $15,000 in debt. Before he died, Charles had asked Rebecca for a promise that she would continue to run the Brandywine Iron Works and carry out the plans they had made together.
Dr. Lukens had just commenced the boilerplate business, and he was sanguine in his hopes for success. He wished me to continue, and I promised to comply. Mother said it would be folly for me to remain, though she thought as a female I was not fit to carry on such a concern.
Rebecca took Charles' dying request seriously, and while struggling to keep her debtors at bay, she reassured customers that the Brandywine Iron Works would still fill their orders as promised.
Dr. Lukens had many good and firm friends, and they all stood by me. The workmen were tried and faithful. And so, with some fear, but more courage, I began to struggle for a livelihood. Now I look back at my daring.
Only 5 months after Charles's death, Elgar's iron-hulled steamship, the Codorus, was launched on the Susquehanna River to huge fanfare and front-page news. Its success established Lukens' reputation as a company that could produce top-quality specialty plate. A few weeks after the successful launch of the Codorus, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter, whom she named Charles Anna in memory of her late husband.
Solomon.
Charles's brother, Solomon Lukens, came to help Rebecca during this period and stayed on as her mill manager for many years.
I have thoroughly repaired the mansion house, built good and substantial tenant houses for my workmen, and put much lime and fencing on the farm. The mill has been rebuilt from the very foundation. The dam entirely rebuilt, wheels put in, castings, furnaces, mill head, mill house. Not a single vestige of the old remains.
She takes this operation, turns the operation around, actually starts making a profit, only to run into the chaos, the panic of 1837.
All is paralyzed, business at a standstill. I have as yet lost nothing, but am in constant fear. I have stopped rolling for a few weeks and set my men to repairing the race dam.
She went through a period, an economic downturn, which was a very important challenge that all of the American entrepreneurs faced in the Industrial Revolution. Her caution in selling to people who weren't trustworthy saved her, but so did her willingness to spend some money during downtime to keep the skilled workmen around. Because long term, then they were grateful and were more likely to stick around.
Between 1832 and 1850, anywhere between 30 and 60% of the ironworks either failed or simply went out of business. They went bankrupt. That wasn't true of Rebecca Lukens' operation. Maybe it's her religious values and her values as a human being and her experience with hard personal times that is responsible for this, but her workers stay loyal. Her creditors stay loyal, and more than that, they have confidence in her.
By the 1830s, engineers had succeeded in building a steam engine light enough for use in trains and ships. And steam locomotives and steamboats began transporting people and goods up and down the East Coast.
We know that for Rebecca, changes in transportation are fundamental to the new market that she's seeking to serve by her innovations in the rolling mill. She's rolling plate for steam engine boilers. And steam engine boilers are used on steamboats and they're used on railroads. And those are the two new fast forms of transportation. For the first time, people can move faster than horses and oxen.
As a manifestation of incredible power harnessed by human beings, harnessed by engineering, harnessed by science, the steam engine became a metaphor for change and for power and for progress.
By 1840, 3,300 miles of railroad track had been built. Samuel Morse had obtained a patent for the telegraph. And Rebecca Lukens had agents selling her products in markets from Boston to Louisiana.
One of the things that we often forget when we think about business, because we have this legend of the individual who pulls himself up by his bootstraps, the sort of Andrew Carnegie model, is that many business people had very good sort of support system, and Rebecca had hers.
Rebecca had 3 really important networks. One, quite immediately, is the old Pennsylvania families that she's connected to, and then more broadly, that community in Philadelphia and the community in the Brandywine, 2 real important industrial areas that she encountered just kind of walking about, moving in social circles. Another is her Quaker network. There are a lot of Quakers in these businesses.
Being a Quaker and a business person meant more than just having another network.
The fundamental premise upon which Quakerism is built is the idea that there is no division between the secular and the sacred, that one's business life is a part of one's spiritual life. Quaker business practice was deeply based in integrity, that what you should do is always provide fair value for fair value received, and therefore the price was always the same for everyone. One of the many things that makes Rebecca Lukens interesting is the way that she carries over her belief into her daily life. Rebecca's example of a way of living one's beliefs was to refuse to sell to a Navy Yard, even though the people at the Navy Yard reminded her that there was no war and that this wouldn't be used for military purposes.
In 1847, Rebecca Lukens began to retire from actually running the mill. She was 53 years old and had run the Brandywine Iron Works for 22 years. She turned over the management of the business to her sons-in-law, Abraham Gibbons and Charles Houston. The company would continue to be under the management of the family until the end of the 20th century.
I'm Charles Lukens, Houston III, and I'm 5th generation relative to Rebecca Lukens. When I was growing up, right here in Coatesville, I would visit my grandparents, and in many cases, they would talk about Rebecca Lukens and what it really means to carry on the family heritage. Customers know the quality of the name Lukens, and that goes back to Rebecca as well, because of the person that she was and what she has done in terms of influence of her family to be people of integrity and quality.
In early September, her daughter Isabella and son-in-law Charles Houston invited her to join them on an excursion to the Lehigh Mountains of Pennsylvania. In her letters home to her daughter Martha, Rebecca boasts about riding the country's first gravity-propelled train, which had originally been designed to move coal from hilltop mines down to barges on the river.
I am no coward, but I will confess when I looked at the formidable road by which we had to ascend, my heart began to throb, and I thought of you all and whether I should ever again see you. It gave me a thrill, almost a shudder, to view the grand panorama spread below. Vast sums have been expended in facilitating the raising and transporting of coal, and it seems that gigantic efforts have been made to effect these ends.
In 1849, Rebecca's youngest daughter, Charles Anna, died in childbirth. And Rebecca made another deathbed promise, this time to take care of Charles Anna's newborn daughter, Annie.
My dear little Annie is now the light of my house, the bright sunbeam in my dreary life. She calls me Mama, and how my heart bounds to her. Sweet child of my own dear Anne. Nothing could be nearer my heart.
On December 10, 1854, Rebecca Lukens died. On her deathbed, she said, "I have brought my sins and sat them at my Savior's feet, and he has borne for me what I could not bear for myself." In 1859, the company was renamed the Lukens Rolling Mill in Rebecca's honor. It would become the longest continuously operating steel mill in North America.
Rebecca's story, I think, is a good story about American business. And we can think of her as a typical American entrepreneur. It's not just a story about women. It's not just a story about a particular woman and her experience running a business. This is also a much bigger story just about America.
If I had to pick one object to look at closely as a way of getting in touch with Rebecca, it would have to be boilerplate. It's what makes her operation innovative. It's what makes her operation central to industrialization. If you look at boilerplate, it looks like nothing. It looks like this kind of blank sheet of iron. But there's a mystery inside that sheet, that piece of metal that we can't see, that we kind of have to take on faith. You have to know if you're buying boilerplate from Lukens, you are going to be able to count on that boilerplate holding the forces that boilers had to hold.